This episode is filled with spoilers. This is your official spoiler alert. Thank you. On today's episode of Nostalgia 101, we get taken to nerd school by Jen Sopchockchai Bankard. Schools. I have nothing to say. Welcome to the Nostalgia Test Podcast, the show where two longtime friends put their mainstream pop culture past to the ultimate test, the Nostalgia Test.
Yes!
Oh my God. It's gonna
You
say
overthought
like
it.
that.
It's okay.
I overthought it, but it's going to say, everyone, welcome to the Nostalgia Test Podcast. I'm Dan Dissinger. Here
I think
in
everybody
LA.
should be starting to judge your intros, Dan. It's time. It's
Judge
time.
my intros, cut in on the intros.
I'm talking over you on this one. What's up, guys? We're here at the Nostalgia Test 101. It's Nostalgia Test 101 episode. I think that's what we're calling this one, right?
Yeah.
Right? We're getting schooled today in, I guess, nerd culture, right? Is that what we're calling it?
I feel like everything
Popular nerd culture. Now it's popular now.
Now it's
Is
popular.
it now that popular that can you even call it? Should you even call it nerd?
I mean,
It's cool to be a nerd now. I don't know. It's very confusing. Confusing times.
Absolutely. I mean,
Yes.
that's, I think, what we're here to learn about, right? I mean, in the last few episodes of Nostalgia 101, we really opened up the floodgates of trying to not just be funny on this podcast, but, learn something. Both of us need to learn about what we're talking about, but also there's so many amazing people out there that are in the conversation, creating awesome content, and also just expanding the conversation. And I think that's what's been fun about these episodes. But we're here with a amazing guest, a friend of mine, a colleague of mine, someone that I think is doing some really awesome work out there with on her website, The Long Take. Everyone needs to check it out. It's going to be in the show notes, so everyone needs to click and read and share and sign up. Support this stuff. But we're here with Jen Sopchockchai Bankard. Jen, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me. I try to at least be a fairly regular listener. I always have a good time when I tune in.
Oh, thank you. We have another guest coming up too. Like, we have some guests in there, like, oh, we listened to this episode. We listened to this episode. I'm like, that one had good sound, I think.
Don't listen to the first episode, even though
the one I remember the most is Hook, because it was a movie that I have fond memories of. And then when I'm listening to you break it down, I'm like, this is a weird movie. I don't remember how little this makes sense.
Jen, when I rewatched that, and then we brought up in the episode about the mermaids and the mermaid kind of kissing CPR scene, that was when I looked at it and I was like, okay, there's a problem here. This is a major issue here. It's a 2-hour movie that I can't even believe was 2 hours. But we are here to talk about all things that's actually out there right now, which is really also exciting too, right? So why don't you give the audience, tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what you do, and then we'll just jump right in.
Sure. So by day, I work with Dan at USC. I teach writing. And by night, and like Batman style, I am writing. And I have my own Substack called The Long Take. It sort of just started as me posting to social media when I watch stuff. And then what happened was that I think it was the beginning of 2020, I sort of made this commitment to write more regularly and to really do it. And that sort of just naturally evolved into getting the Substack and posting regularly. And now, now it's something that I do all the time. So, I always tell my students that, you don't, especially the ones that are creators or artists, that you don't have to hang back and wait for someone to let you create what you want. We're in an age where you can just go do it. And I sort of said that to enough students that I was like, why am I not just doing it? So that's sort of how it came about. So I cover, all the stuff I like to watch, mainly Star Wars and Marvel. Those are the sort of the two big juggernaut franchises that have new content coming out all the time. But anything else that's kind of generally considered nerd culture, I try to squeeze into, like House of the Dragon, I'm covering right now. And Andor, I think, House of the Dragon. We're in peak TV. It's the time of peak TV right now. House of the Dragon, She-Hulk, Andor, and Rings of Power I haven't caught up with, which makes me very sad because I'm a big Tolkien nerd, but I'm hoping to catch up on that once all the other stuff dies down.
Are you watching Werewolf by Night?
I did watch Werewolf Night. I loved it.
Yeah, I haven't got it. So I'm kind of into it, and obviously I'm like kind of in and out of like that culture for a while. I can't get into the House of Dragon. And I'll tell you why in a second. But I noticed that when Night was on when I was on the Disney Plus app, and I was like, how come I don't want to hit this yet? Like, it's good? You're saying it's a good?
It is very good. Yes.
What does that tie into?
I don't think that's the thing is it's pretty standalone.
Okay.
And that's kind of nice about it. I mean, it does use a couple of it uses characters that if you're deep into the comics that you will recognize their names. Or their faces in some cases. But it is kind of this like really self-contained, love letter to old school horror. And when I say old school, I mean like black and white 1930s, like, like old, like original Dracula kind of.
Oh, I was going to say, like, oh, really? That's cool.
So it's shot almost entirely in black and white. It's got a really kind of like Hitchcock suspense feel to it. It's got monster hunters. There's a lot of kind of implied lore. Yeah, I was really surprised. So it's right now it doesn't have any sort of major implications for other things going on with Marvel at the moment. But I think it works really well. Especially, so if you like old school horror, but not like me, like you like spooky, but not super scary. It's a good sweet spot for that.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna go into that because I just finished. I am watching Andor. I get most of my reviews and like, what the heck did I just watch? Like I said, like I was never really a Star Wars fan. I liked Star Wars just because like, like the big movies and stuff, but I never really got into it until probably about 4 years ago or 5 years ago. And then I listened to all my reviews on YouTube. New Rockstars is where I get all my info about like what did I just watch and how does it connect to anything.
It's Easter egg city.
Yeah, exactly. Like I could do like like Eric Voss is my guy to be like, all right, whatever he says might happen. Like because he does a lot of predictions that you're like, wow, he got most of this right. Yeah. So like with Andor, first of all, I like the pacing of the show. I just get confused a lot. Like I need to watch episodes like 2 or 3 times to be like, what the heck did I just watch? So it's like, I like everybody's saying like they like it, but I'm like, but this is like, there's so much going on, but at the same time on the screen, it doesn't seem like there's a lot, but you're like, what? But so much that like one scene might happen. You're like, this is affecting so many different things. And I think it is cool to see like a different class structure in the world of Star Wars that like we were never used to, So
yes, the focus on bureaucracy and sort of how the inner workings of the Empire and all that to me are totally fascinating. And like a side of Star Wars we haven't seen. I mean, if you go back to what George Lucas said about the prequel trilogy, that's sort of what he was going for. He wanted to get into the deep politics of the Star Wars universe and talk about like, sanctions and taxes and like all the like international relations between planets and all this sort of stuff. And I think this show is really delivering on that in a big way. But you're right. Like, so what's really interesting about Andor is that there was a report that came out a couple of days ago that it is the lowest viewed Star Wars show on Disney Plus so far. Wow. Which is bananas to me because it's so good. But, I think part of it is because of what you're talking about, where I've heard from multiple people that they feel like they're not getting it. And they assume that's because they haven't watched a lot of other Star Wars. And it's actually not that. It has nothing to do with that. I think it's because I think you can, as someone who knows a lot about Star Wars and has watched everything, sometimes multiple times. I feel like what it's asking you, the work it's asking you to do as a viewer actually doesn't have to do with Star Wars canon a whole lot.
Wow.
So I think there's some sort of weird like miscommunication or misunderstanding of why people are not getting it.
I have to agree with that because like I think we've been used to that everything that comes out has such a deep meaning. Like it has to go along with all these things that you're trying to like figure out where you just could just like watch this. Like it's just people who are trying to go undercover to like help other factions. And like, I guess, yeah, if like I said, like I watch Eric and he's like telling me in the museum or like that the shop that what's his name owns, and he's like, you could see all these different Easter eggs of what. Oh, that's the shield from episode 1, and that's this and that. But like, if you don't know that, you're still like enjoying a show about like traders and undercovers and people who are like really are trying to fight against the Empire, but like in a very secretive way and not so like loud like Luke and Leia and stuff. Like these guys, like they had no idea. Like I don't want to spoil what's going on, but like the thing that happens, you're like, you're doing
well. You're doing well. Keep going.
Yeah. They just had like no idea. So like I do, but I was frustrated a little bit. And this is the one show you can't double screen.
Yeah.
I find myself double screening all the time. Me and my wife yell at each other like, you're double screening. You can't. On end. If you're double screening, you miss the whole episode. You're just like, I don't know what.
I know people who like to watch it with the captions on for a very similar reason because they have to kind of catch everything. So to me, if I were to try to, and I might start doing this soon because I want the show to keep getting renewed and because I like it, and so I want to spread the word if people aren't watching it or think that they shouldn't watch it. And I would compare it to something like The Wire. Like if you remember the Wire has so many characters, it's sprawling, right? God. It's this sort of like, the phrase that I like to use in my Andor reviews is ecological structure. Like there's so many players and they're all kind of interacting with each other directly and indirectly. And you have to really sit with it. And it's not going to give you any easy answers. You have to infer everything, right? You have to be like, oh, this person said this to this person. That means that later they're going to go over to this person and do this other thing, right? And so I think if you go into it with the mindset of it's like a prestige HBO show like that, but it's Star Wars. It just happens to be set in the Star Wars universe. I think that helps a lot in terms of how you watch it. Yeah, if you're going into it thinking it's going to be The Mandalorian, where it's like a shoot, which I love too, a shoot 'em up, Western samurai story, right? Like that's very action heavy and has a very different feel to it. Like you're going to be kind of like, huh, what is this? Yeah, because it's so different.
So do you feel like what you do on your website is review or not? Because the way you're talking about this, it doesn't seem like to me it's just like a review, right? Like when I look at what you're doing, like, and I'm thinking it through, like what we like this idea of like as a teacher or an instructor or just as writers, right? Like as a writer, it's like, what is it like you're doing more now? Like you're unpacking. There's a lot of unpacking going on. You're creating like vocabulary, just like the way you just explained this idea of the, something ecological and like creating this webbing of character. To me, like what you do is larger than that. So when you got started, was that like the idea, like as you went into your first and second post, like I'm not doing reviews, I'm doing whatever you feel like it is that you're doing?
Yeah, I think in the podcasting world, at least, the phrase that people use is deep dive. I think is probably the best thing to describe what I'm doing. And I didn't necessarily start with that intention. Part of it is because before I had the site and when I was doing just the shorter version of it, I as a social media post, I would have the short take and the long take, which I still have now. So that's kind of how it started, where I was like, what's the tweet length review of like, do you want to watch this? Heavily inspired by Siskel and Ebert, okay, if you were like, should I watch this? Yeah. Because part of the sort of flood of great stuff we have now, the problem is that like it's hard to decide what to spend your time on. And so I was trying to make the short take the sort of like grab and go, Siskel and Ebert, thumbs up, thumbs down. Do you want to watch this? Who should be watching this? Who's going to like this? And then the long take sort of allowed me to sort of breathe and be like, okay, like let me dig into like what I really want to get into and sort of break this down in a way that kind of bridges the gap between me, the hardcore nerd who has seen everything and knows everything and can tell you all about all this other stuff I watched and how it fits into that context, and sort of bridge that between me and the sort of the fan, but more of a casual fan, who sort of like Manny said is like, what did I just watch?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's really interesting because now with these big IP franchises, there's this whole secondary, I don't want to say industry because like, my site is free. I don't make any money. There's literally no industry involved for me, but I'm a part of this larger discourse, I guess maybe is the better word, the secondary discourse that helps everybody understand the primary.
But I think that's like, so websites like you are indirectly helping all this, right? Like without people like you explaining a little bit and being like, okay, here's for like the super nerds and here's for the people that are kind of like getting into it. You're almost helping them promote the show or market or like make it easier to take in, like, because some people might just be like, this is just way too much and I'm never going to catch up. So I'm done. I don't care. I want to watch TV and not think. You're able to like make them, okay, I'm going to read this quick. Yeah, I want to check this out. And then if I really want to know more, maybe I'll read the long take to know it even more. So it makes it like easier for me to take this in. So now I enjoy it because then I don't feel stupid watching the show. Like,
yeah. It's also,
but I also think that there's an opt-in part of that where if a show really is successful to me, you shouldn't have to do that. You shouldn't have. I mean, I want everyone to read my articles, obviously, but you shouldn't have to do that. Like, I want to be part of the conversation. But I think a show is successful when it can pitch to both levels and let people opt in and out of how deep they want to go with it. But sorry, Dan, I cut you off.
No, that's okay. I mean, because I was thinking like the idea of like what you do and like kind of moving into this question of like, you know, how something like it's more than that, like what you do on your website. And I guess what other podcasters do and writers is develop the cultural part, right? Like there's the product, which is the movie or the show. And then underneath that makes it kind of like even more substantial are those like subcultural or like cultural aspects that like, or the culture or discourse that creates the substance underneath it, the debate, the old debate in Star Wars of who shot first, right? Like with Han Solo and like who would come up with that other than nerds, right? Like, and I'm saying nerds in like the nicest way, being like, no one thinks that, but then when you put that out there, it creates these sub narratives that then develop other characters, and then you can like build worlds off that. So I'm kind of curious, like in terms of like this idea of how nerd culture has become so much of popular culture. Like, did you ever see that coming as you were like a kid loving these things, and then how do you think that happened? I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's a big question, but like maybe like your best understanding of it.
I think part of it is just we all grew up and now we're the ones in charge. I mean, not literally the three of us, but unfortunately, but you know, yeah, I think that's part of it. And the example I will use is the prequel trilogy. So when I was a kid, the Phantom Menace came out when I was in high school. And I was so excited. I was just, because I had been just wearing out my original trilogy VHS tapes. I was so ready. I'm like, I get to be, and I was born, I'm generationally adjacent. I was born in 83. So I'm right there with you. And I had missed, Return of the Jedi came out in 1983. Yeah. So I hadn't been around for a theatrical release of a Star Wars movie. And so I was so excited. And to be 100% honest, I walked out of the theater for every three of those movies, just huge smile on my face. Loved every minute of it. Right. I had, like people gave me Star Wars merchandise, like for my birthday. So I got a Jar Jar Binks inflatable chair, like the whole thing. I was all in. And then what happened was as I got older, the critical backlash of those movies sort of hit. And then I kind of had to go into hiding a little bit of like, oh, I guess it's not cool to like these movies. But now we've come back around because when Obi-Wan Kenobi series came out last spring, the Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen went on the press tour, and every interview they sort of were totally astounded by how much love and praise all of these people were giving them, because they were like, does anyone remember what it was like when those movies came out? And like, nobody liked them. Everyone was mad.
Well, that goes back to like, you know, as time passes, people put, you know, you paint a better picture of what the past was like, right? You know, like it's been long enough that people actually like are longing for that kind of like feeling, you know, like this goes back to like what our podcast is about, like nostalgia, like, and especially the Nostalgia 101 shows that we've been doing, just like talking about what that does to you. Like everyone that's going to see them, it's like, oh my God, I remember being a kid when this movie came out, even though it got so much crap. Like, it's like, but that was their childhood. That's our childhood. Like, like you said, you went to the movies, you got everything. And it's like, even though it got so much crap, now everybody's like, oh no, we missed you guys because it's a longing, and it's like, okay, it wasn't that bad, and you know, like you clean it off, and you just like paint. You only show the pretty parts, you know, like. So
yeah, for me, it's sort of like I'm able to. The critic part of my brain can acknowledge what doesn't work about those movies, and there are some things that do not work about those movies. And then there's a part of me that's the fan, that's the nostalgic fan, that's able to still enjoy them, enjoy the characters, have a fondness for them. And what's interesting is so I'm kind of in this in-between state, I think, because I can sort of live both lives. But if we ask, if Dan and I ask our students, if I talk to students about Star Wars, they ask me to rank all the movies. And I put the prequels kind of far down compared to, you know, especially compared to the original trilogy. And they get so upset. They're like, Revenge of the Sith is my number one Star Wars movie.
Wow. Okay.
They're like, how did you put it that low?
Wow. And
so it's just so interesting, because then we start talking about it. We like the same things about it, but it's, you know, they just have a very different perspective, because that's, they even have a stronger nostalgia connection to it than I do. So it's been interesting for me, because with Obi-Wan Kenobi coming out, and all of these younger people, a little bit younger than me, coming out of the woodwork, showing so much love for the prequel movies. It was recently the Attack of the Clones 20th anniversary. Yeah. And there's all this love. And I'm just like, oh, I'm back in it. Like, I can like these things again, you know.
Yeah, I mean, they were really that you're saying that generation, your kids, your college students were probably like real kid, like real kids, like not that we weren't real kids, but like they were like tiny, and like
if I was, I don't want to do the math. I'm not going to try to do the math, but you know, I would, if I had been in high school, they would have been, you know, in elementary school or something like that.
Yeah, so like they were remembering that, like that's like trying to say, like if someone was kind of say to me that, like I'm trying to think about like if you tried to say that this movie was bad, and I'm like, no way, like, you know, Little Mermaid. And someone was like, "Oh, it wasn't that great." It's like, "What are you kidding me? Like, that's my childhood. Like, that was like, so like,
take that back.
I know every single song, you know, like." So, like to them, they probably just remember being, you know, like they were like experiencing the I don't know how to say it, like the Toy Story aspect of it, you know, like So, like that little boy, you know, when he's flying the little like the racer. Like they were that little boy, you know, so of course they love it.
Right. So. And that's how we get Lightyear, a movie not made for kids. Let's not get into that. I shouldn't. I almost didn't bring it up for this reason. Maybe it was worth it.
I actually wanted.
You know what? There are parts of like that nerd culture or nostalgia to me that like plays on nostalgia, or does it, like when the Rescue Rangers movie came out, we did the trailer only. I didn't watch it. I couldn't get through it, or you, but I fell
asleep 3 times.
I felt like it was doing something on purpose to me that I was like, I'm not falling for this. But I feel like when it comes to some of the stuff that you write about, there is a real I feel like there's in the terms of the creators of those shows, a love for the material. And so because
they were the kids too.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's the thing, is that we've all grown up. And so now we get to sort of, you know, play with our action figures in the sandbox, but with a film budget, basically. Exactly. I feel like I've read interviews where people have said basically that. So yeah, it's really interesting because I think part of to go back to your original question way back of why is nerd culture now mainstream? I think with these big IP franchises, it's because of nostalgia. It's because, that's what's making them in demand. But it's also creating this really interesting storytelling problem where, you have to both tap into the nostalgia. You have to have the fan service and the Easter eggs and the winks and the nods. But then you also have to create something new. Because if we think about something like The Force Awakens, when that movie came out, people were like, Star Wars is back. It like rekindled some feeling that they had. But then, a couple months afterwards, people started talking about how it basically is just rehashing A New Hope and is not doing anything new. And it's only giving us the nostalgia, only giving us the fan service. So that's not enough in fan discourse. People want both. They want to have it both ways. They want to feel that feeling again, but they want something new and original and creative. And it's really hard to do.
As time passes, it gets harder and harder, right?
Right. Because especially with these longstanding franchises, everything you add affects everything that came before. And they're oftentimes, with these prequels and stuff, they're oftentimes sequels, prequels, everything. The chronology of the timeline is not the same as the release chronology. And so there's this weird patchwork that all has to be have continuity. Because I know this is an anti-reboot podcast. So I'm not talking about reboots necessarily. I think that's a different thing. We're going to do this again, just in a modern setting or whatever. We're going to do Ghostbusters, but with all women. Right. But franchises are different because it's an incremental, it's like accretion. It's like every story gets added and it has to fit perfectly with everything else.
Sure. Yeah. Like I definitely don't really like reboots, but I don't mind a good, sequel / continuation or prequel, or just acknowledge that the first one existed and make a world around that. But I hate when people try to just reset and pretend as if that world didn't work and then or just redo it. Right. And it's to me, it's not sometimes just too terrible to do. So there have been some good ones, few and far between, but yes.
I feel like I have the soundbite of you being just stop the reboots. It goes in my head every once in a while.
Because especially 80s reboots, you can't, there's so many movies that you just can't reboot. It's just not possible. The movies were made at the time, the culture, everything, the writing, everything was happening around the drugs that were being used. There's a reason why those movies work. But for instance, Maverick. I loved Maverick, but Maverick wasn't a reboot.
No.
That was a pure sequel that to me was done really well, as in the nodding, the winks, the nod, and a continuation of what that franchise, if you will, is now. And how does it work with our culture now? And I thought they did a great job. I mean, we were basically. Did you see it?
I have not seen it. It's my big shame from the summer. I never got around to seeing it.
Because I was about to say.
Are you about to spoil something?
Kind of, yeah. But there's a reason why when you talk about nostalgic, when you watch it, you're going to be especially when you watch it, you're going to be oh, there's a reason why a lot of people like this movie. Because there's stuff that is happening that is in our collective nostalgic want, and we just remember. And there's a reason why I think it did really well, and it hit all the bells and whistles, winks, nods, and everything. So I think it was really done well. I mean, yes, there was definitely cheesy movie. It's Tom Cruise movie. There's gonna be cheesy one-liners and Tom Cruise being Tom Cruise, but it was still a good one. But they do some bad reboots, and they do some bad stories, like you said. There are sometimes let me ask you. I know we're all over the place, but you obviously like Star Wars. You like Marvel, yes. I'm assuming.
Mm-hmm.
Did you like She-Hulk?
I love She-Hulk.
I thought She-Hulk was great.
Yeah.
I love that it was almost I almost don't need them to always tie into each other. Mm. And I like that this was a little different feel. What I'm jumping to is, did you like Love and Thunder?
I did. not as it, it's not my favorite Marvel movie, but I feel like it leaned a little too hard in the Taika Waititi humor.
Yes.
For my taste. I enjoyed it when I saw it, but as I'm walking out of the theater, I'm like, that was a lot of Taika Waititi.
Yeah, I loved it in the theater and I thought it was great, but like to me, it didn't fit with any part of the universe. Like, and like why they made Thor almost become like this like airhead. Like even like the movies have progressively made him like not a god, in my opinion. Like the way he thinks. Like it's like he wasn't that stupid in the first one.
He's got strong himbo energy now.
Yeah, like what are you doing to him? And he wasn't
so
like
that actually was big. I have a behind the scenes answer to that. That's because Chris Hemsworth was like, I'm having the worst time playing Thor. Like, this character's so boring and like so serious. Like, can we please kind of revamp him a little bit? And so when he got together with Taika Waititi for Thor Ragnarok,
which
they basically rebooted the character,
yes,
so that he was more lighthearted, kind of like self-aware.
So I like the Ragnarok, but I think they dumbed him down even more.
More for Love and Thunder, yeah.
Do you feel that they can do more, like like with comics, like people take on the story and then they maybe write a new narrative, and even if they kill a character, or especially with Batman, what they did with Batman, like when Bane breaks his back, but then you bring Batman into another story, or Superman dies and then they bring in all these other things. Like, do you feel like that in terms of how Marvel movies work and Star Wars and things like that, that they are taking that on much more? They're looking at how comic books kind of worked with these multiple narratives, and they're like, okay, we can do this even if something happens, like, and a character dies as a beloved character. There's so much more that we can do.
Yeah, and I think that's where we're headed. That's going to become more and more the case. I think Marvel just recently introduced the concept of multiverse through a couple shows, Loki and What If, and the foreshadowing is that the villain that's going to kind of pop up everywhere, Kang, is sort of like he's a like a multidimensional time traveler, right? And so the idea is that eventually, when they start running out of stories, or like painting themselves into corners with the current storyline, that they can sort of set up, well, this is Earth 626, this is Earth 823, like they can sort of set up these multiple realities where there's multiple storylines going on at the same time, much like what happens in comic books. And I think with the Disney Plus TV series, I think a lot of the critical discourse has really focused on the pacing and how much happens in how many episodes, and like whether it's too rushed or if it's too slow or whatever. And I think that I think it's the kind of them working out how do we tell comic book like stories but on screen. And I think that because if you read a 5-issue comic book run, right, it's like tons of stuff, crazy stuff happens and then it's over. Right.
Yeah.
And some characters you never may see again. They might pop up in something else. Right. And so I think that's kind of the model they're working from, is they're like, well, like, we're Marvel Comics. Like, let's tell stories like we would tell them in the comics, but adapt them for screen. And so I think if that's sort of where the misunderstanding comes from, of like, oh, like as an adaptation, this doesn't work.
Yeah.
Unless you think about it as a comic book.
I've noticed I watched Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. And while I was watching it, I was like, if you didn't watch What If, would you enjoy this movie? And I think you would, but like I got more out of it because I had watched What If, which I thought was a great show. And I was like, wow, there's a lot going on here. But I see what you're saying now, that like, oh, this is how we're going to be able to justify changing stories to people and let them on, and like not let, and like the mainstream, let's say the people who aren't the nerds, or used to what comic books are like, this is how they're going to be okay with it. Because like, oh, well, that story happened in that universe, not in this one. So now we're back to the regular one that we're used to. But at the same time, this is going on here. So we get to make another movie with, Wolverine in it. It's like, well, how? And it's like, well, that's because we're here. It's like, okay, I'm so happy.
And if you go back to a lot of the original Marvel comics or the vintage ones from the 70s and 80s, citation is a regular practice, right? Yeah. In the panel, it will say like, see issue number whatever of of Avengers, blah blah blah, right? And so it's sort of the expectation is that you're dipping in and out, but like you get more out of it if you go look up the other stuff.
Oh, yeah. Wow, that's right. So wait, so I want to even take us back just to be like, so which comics, like as a kid, were you into? Like, were you an avid comic book reader? Was that something that you did, or is it this? So
I was not actually. So I can't I've come at it a little bit backwards. So for me, it was growing up with the first comic book movies. So those original Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies, the original X-Men movies that came out in the early 2000s. So that was my, and then of course the genesis with Iron Man 1, like the genesis of the MCU. So that was kind of my entry point for superhero stories. And then it was sort of after I got it really into those movies that then I went back and started reading some. So my comic book knowledge is very spotty, but I always really enjoy it. So, and I always get a lot out of it when I go back and read some of those stories. So what I'm trying to do now, I'm not very good at it because there's just too much content coming out and I have to write. But when something's about to come out, I'm tempted to read the source material so I can sort of see how it pans out. And then that's sort of how I decide what I'm going to be reading. Like I managed to do that with Hawkeye. And that was really great, because so much of that was like comic book accurate, like down to the framing of certain shots. So that was really cool to see. But there's a disadvantage to that too, of like, if you go in knowing too much, then maybe you won't get swept up in it.
Right.
I like that show. I thought that show was fun.
I
like that it was like Christmas time and it was kind of shot like a Christmas movie.
Yeah, I'm tempted to make that like a holiday tradition rewatch. I feel like that might hold up.
It feels that way, right? It does.
It feels like it's designed for that, because there's like, the holiday feels are so prominent in that show.
Yeah.
There's something so great about superheroes. Like, people are so into it now. It's just become so much more a part of the way we, even with actors, like getting a superhero movie or whatever is like a big deal. I mean, I remember when Manny and I went to the theater, we saw the first Spider-Man movie. I feel like I remember very specifically sitting there when it was over, we looked at each other like, oh my God, like, that hit me hard. Like, I don't know what it was, but then it was, especially with the X-Men films too, because I used to read the comics and watch the television show. I mean, it was like super into that cartoon.
I love the
It's coming back. X-Men 97.
Oh, it's coming back. I'm freaking out. But it's so crazy that like these things are coming back. And these were the things that like I would tell you, there was like a small group of people that you talk to about it. Same thing with like tabletop games, like Magic the Gathering. Loved Magic the Gathering. Didn't want anyone else to
Dan has to put that in every.
I have to, because it's super nerdy.
That's your main nerd cred.
That is my main nerd cred.
Magic the Gathering.
I want to start playing Magic the Gathering now. Like, again,
I think I played one time with you, and
it's so much fun.
This is way too much going on.
It's so much fun.
My partner John is he would get mad if I didn't mention this. He's a huge Magic the Gathering collector.
Oh, really?
So he's got all the rare cards that you would be like, oh man, like he has. Yeah. He's got binders and binders of Magic cards.
Oh my God, it's amazing. But what's funny is like those things are mainstream, like, or people, especially like Dungeons and Dragons and tabletop games, are making a huge comeback. And this kind of more, maybe like I'll ask you, like, do you think that there's some other part of like this idea of like creating narrative, right? Like, because a lot of these like things, especially tabletop games, there's narrative involved. There's like building a narrative, build a world, be a part of it. Do you feel like that's also something that new people coming into those spaces are gravitating towards? And if so, like, what is it that they want out of it, maybe? Or you can,
Yeah, that's a great question. I think part of it is the fact that it's transmedia. So the fact that within Star Wars, you can go play a board game, you can go play a video game, you could read novels, you can watch the movies, you can watch the shows, you can read comics. It's everywhere. And it all ties together in some way, right? And every, you could talk to two different Star Wars fans and they might have completely different orientations to the canon because of like whether they've just watched the movies or if they've watched the movies and they've read the comics, or they, read all the Legends books, right, that are no longer canon, and get salty about that, right? So, it's really, really interesting. I think that's what is the big draw to people, is that it's so rich, and there's so many possibilities for storytelling within a particular universe, right? That's why it's called the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because that implies that it's expansive and that it, the stories could go anywhere, and I think what we're seeing now, especially with the Disney Plus series, starting to kind of really pick up momentum, and there's so many, like, they're not going to stop. The Marvel train is not going to stop anytime soon. It's just like show after show after show, movie show, and now they're starting, you can see with Werewolf by Night, with She-Hulk, they're starting to experiment a little bit with genre, right? It's like we're dipping a little bit into, we're going to make a half-hour lawyer comedy. We're going to make a black and white movie, right?
I mean, they did that test with WandaVision. I thought was phenomenal. Like the way it was shot, and like and everything was nostalgic. Like it's all like, and like what you were saying, how expansive the universe is. There are people that play the video games, and there's some storylines that are going on that you would only know if you played the video games, which is crazy.
So built into it is kind of this reward system. Like you are rewarded as a fan if you recognize something. For me, within Star Wars, I've watched all of the animated series. Oh, wow. Which, like not, most, the average, at least the average casual fan has not watched those, right?
Like Bad Batch and stuff like that.
Yeah, Bad Batch and Clone Wars and like all this. I love all those shows. Rebels is probably my favorite one. And the characters from those shows are popping up in the live action series. And so, Cad Bane is a really good example. He showed up in the Book of Boba Fett, otherwise known as The Mandalorian 2.5.
Yes. I couldn't. They were like, this show is not going anywhere. We need to put Mandalorian in here. like what? The show was about. It was supposed to be about Boba Fett. That actor just can't. He can't carry a show. I like. What's the woman in that? His sidekick. Amazing. Yes. She needs her own show. She's so good.
Her character is originally from the animated series.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
She was an animated character before she was a live action character. So
you were going to talk about the cowboy guy, right?
Cad Bane. Yeah. So when he shows up, right, to most people, he's just this like cool looking, menacing Clint Eastwood like alien, right?
Yeah.
And you don't need to understand what his role is in the story in Book of Boba Fett. You don't really need to know much more than that. But for me, I saw his silhouette and his hat, and I was like, is it Cad Bane? And then he rolls up, and it's just like, yes, that's amazing, because he and Boba Fett have this history. There's this is a really deep cut because it wasn't even actually like a part of the show that aired, but there are these lost episodes of Clone Wars that show that he kind of adopted Boba Fett. He was like his mentor. He taught him how to be a bounty hunter. And so for me, when I'm watching that scene in Book of Boba Fett, there's so much meaning that I'm being rewarded. The show is like, we see you. Yeah. We see that you put in the work, you put in the time.
Yeah.
And now we're going to make you really happy.
Yes. Wow. That's crazy. So like, there's so many layers of, who we're going to make happy. And right. It is, like you said, like, I didn't know who he was, but he looked like a badass character. When he showed up, I was like, dude, this guy looks crazy, and he needs his own. Like, I was upset, like how, I guess, quickly his story ended, but did it though? Because like, isn't there like a
question mark? Yeah,
that like he might still be alive. So it's like,
in Star Wars, no one is ever really dead.
Yeah, I feel like they do that to be like.
You could even see, Darth Maul. I guess spoilers for things that are really old, but Darth Maul gets sliced in half and he comes back. So
yeah, I feel like they do that also because like they imagine that's like a test to see like if people really like this character, then we could do a spin-off or we could do more with them. We will. Like there's like you said, like it's a train that will not stop. And like, do you feel that it's too watered down, or you're just like keep it coming?
Yeah, I'm the type of fan who's just happy to be here. I'm just like, keep it coming. I'll watch it all. I'll mostly like it all. I'm kind of an apologist when it comes to things that critically I know aren't perfect, but they brought that feeling that nostalgia feeling for me.
Okay.
So yeah, Book of Boba Fett. I if someone asked you, did you like that? I'd say I loved it. But if you ask me, like, was it the best Disney Plus Star Wars show? I'm gonna be like, all right, like let's sit down and talk about it. What were some of the issues, right? So and I'm able to kind of live in both of those spaces. I think not everyone is though. Like, so, and that's actually a really interesting part of sort of fandom right now, is that there's kind of like people who are like, just let me like what I like. And then there are people out there who are like, you are wrong. Like, this movie was bad. This movie was good. Like, and it's such an interesting time.
I had
for fandom.
I had an assistant brewer who was like, really, he would fill me in. Like, he has tattoos of Star Wars and stuff. And he's like, the worst people in Star Wars are like, it's like, to me, I compare it to like surfers. Like, surfers give surfing a bad name because they're like locals only, but they want to chill. And it's like they want everybody to like Star Wars, and then they're fighting amongst each other about like, like, no, that wasn't good enough. It was like, but they made a live action show of this, and you're still not happy. It's like, well, he didn't follow everything, and it's like his lightsaber was supposed to be yellow. Like, what are you doing? Like, so it was like, he was just like, I hate Star Wars fans, even though I am one. So,
well, that's the part about like kind of the idea of like it back, years ago when nerd culture was like the really intense fan, right? And it's kind of like liking a band and then they get too big and it's like, I hate this band. They're too popular.
They're not cool anymore.
They're not cool anymore, but they're still going to put good music out, and you kind of like force yourself not to like it, or you're just like, well, you only like this album. You came in at this point. But I feel like the way you've been speaking about this in this episode, it's like the worlds are so expansive. Everyone has their entry point and everyone gets to enter where they are. And the access is there for you to kind of go back and like enjoy this and that. And even rewatching things to get the Easter eggs, right? Like, I think like sometimes I feel like, because I know sometimes I'm really behind on a lot of things to watch and stuff. And I'm like, should I even dive in? But then it's just like, why not? Because like, it's going to be there. I'm going to be able to enjoy it. And it's just, it's also like, sometimes I feel like people like try to rank their own, like rank their fandom and be like, I'm the best fan ever because of XYZ,
Yeah. I mean, I've been in many conversations with other fans, the ones that I am friends with and interact with on a regular basis are all very gracious and will correct me if I'm wrong about something or whatever. But I've definitely been in conversations with strangers, like at conventions and stuff, or waiting in line for like a toy or something, like all the crazy things that I do, who try to assert their fan dominance, where they're like, well, this, I don't know, makes them feel better. I don't know. So actually, as a fan, and I think, not, to add another layer, as a female fan, I think I've kind of grown up being really self-conscious about my fandom and in particular my encyclopedic knowledge, right? If I talk to casual fans, they're like, wow, you're such a Star Wars expert. If I talk to other hardcore Star Wars nerds, I feel like, oh, like, what if I say the wrong thing? Like, what if I get something wrong? And I like, that's a weird source of anxiety for me.
Yeah.
And so I think that's partly because we like fandom has this weird, like, who's the best nerd?
Right.
Are there is there like actually shows of like there should be like a game show of like trivia knowledge, like Jeopardy of Star Wars, like see who
that
would
sounds
be
so
like,
stressful.
Yeah, it sounds stressful, and I feel like people would just scream at the host, be like, you didn't get it right, like
you're wrong.
I was gonna ask you that.
It depends on which world you're talking about.
But to bring it back, because I feel like we've mentioned She-Hulk a couple of times but haven't actually really talked about it. I think the genius of She-Hulk is that it says out loud all of that stuff, right? It's like it points to fandom and toxic fandom in particular, right? And all the commentary. It shows social media comments about She-Hulk. It's so self-aware and kind of like tries to confront the discourse about certain fandoms in a way that I thought was really smart.
Yeah, because I was going to say
the robot.
Yes.
Sorry,
that literally has a black cap like Kevin Feige.
Yeah.
So
Dan, you haven't seen it?
I've seen a few, only like episode 1 and 2. And
my God.
But it was great when I was watching it. I thought it was interesting though, when she became the Hulk, how her hair changed and everything. Like she like got styled, like she became styled when she became the Hulk, and when she goes back to human form, her hair becomes curly, and like when she's the Hulk, her hair is straight and really coiffed in a way. And it does, like you said, like it does make that, for me, like it's good to hear that it's self-aware like that, because there is a commentary. Like if you're a woman superhero, there are things even in the aesthetic that you must look like while fighting all these things. Like there have been screenshots and people talking about like how certain women were even animated in the old X-Men like show, where Rogue doesn't even, it looks like they just painted her what she wore on her, and she's basically looks naked, but like this thing is painted on her, where Gambit's just wearing a trench coat the whole time. And it's really interesting, kind of like the dichotomy between that, because I was going to even ask you, like with your website, you know, and like writing about this idea of like it, you know, keep it, do you is there an extra pressure because you're a fan, but like a fan, like a woman who is putting this out there in the public, that you're just like that people that, you know, that there's going to be an extra I guess close reading of it? Do you feel like when that happens, or do you just like, I know what I know and I'm really confident about it? Obviously you are, but like that, like you don't care too much.
Right. I think I haven't had to think about it because I don't have enough people reading it yet,
Okay.
to be honest. So it's like mostly people who are my friends reading it. So they're all very supportive, and they, you know, they're the healthy kind of fans to interact with. So, but yeah, I mean, I do have to think about that, because one of the, actually for She-Hulk, one of the things I was worried about going in was how it was going to portray her as a female superhero, and the idea of like, because the trailer in particular made it seem like it was sort of like they were going to go for like almost like a Sex and the City sort of vibe of like, oh, she's Hulk, but she does girly thing, like, you know, I don't know, it's hard to explain. Because they picked the things that she's like, there's someone complimenting her body, and like it was just a montage of weird things. I was like, is this, it didn't give me the best impression of what the show was going to be like, and I was pleasantly surprised, and it ended up being really sharp and witty and satirical, and sort of like taking on those stereotypes in a way that was really good. So hopefully, thankfully it worked out, but I'm like, who cut together this trailer and thought this was the way to market this show? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's on my other podcast, I'm Writing Remix. We've interviewed someone who does trailers, and it's really interesting to think about like how they want to market something, even if it's not. That's what he talks about, marketing something that wasn't good and having to cut a trailer that kind of tricks the audience. So it's kind of feels like maybe in that case, like, can we cut a trailer about a satire, like something that's very self-aware, it's satirical, it's got some commentary and stuff, but really we're talking about who are the people we got to get in first, right? Like, and it's just like, let's trick that, like, very, I don't know. And as a man, that kind of is insulting too. Like you're trying to trick a male audience to be like, oh, is this what it's going to be like? And I feel like in those,
but I don't know if that's insulting, because like they are marketing towards like.
I know, but they think of men of only being this way, like this, like,
right.
Like, oh,
I mean, unfortunately, I mean, like, to speak of like what you're saying, like how the comic used to be drawn, and how like a woman superhero was going, like they were probably saying like, well, most of the people who are reading this are men, so you know, men, the majority of men could be animals. I'm not speaking like everyone is, but like they're like, all right, let's just do this because this is going to get the majority. You know, like unfortunately, sex sells, or fortunately, depending on which side you're on. And they're like, oh yeah, let's, like you said, like, let's make this preview like Sex in the City, like, you know, and get people to actually watch it, but then be like, well, I'm here. And this is not what I thought it was going to be, but now it is actually enjoyable. So I'm going to watch it. You know, like I love the show. I think it was done really well. I thought that whole like Kevin robot, like it was great. I love like,
don't spoil it for Dan or all of our listeners, I guess. I just realized we didn't do any spoiler warnings or anything. Like
Dan could add that in
right in the beginning of the episode.
I do love like how like like you said, like they comment on like how she's like going through her story. She's like, no, I'm going to tell my story the way I want it to. Like, oh no, you have to do it this way. And it's like, cause there's such a formula, but it's like, well, we could switch it up. Like, it's okay. Like, we don't have to do what everybody else wants to do, but at the same time, we could give them a little bit of what they wanted, but not everything. So
So what's interesting is that, you know, a couple, because I listen to lots of podcasts about Marvel and Star Wars stuff, and I read lots of, you know, Hollywood Reporter articles and things like that. And two behind the scenes thing that kind of add interesting layers to it. One is that originally the first episode was supposed to be later in the season. Oh. They were going to show her origin story and bring in Bruce Banner much later. Okay. And I guess, you know, Marvel, the Kevins of Marvel were like, no, we actually have to move that to the front, because, you know, they didn't say why, but presumably because it's like people are going to get into the show because they're going to come for Hulk. They're going to stay for She-Hulk. Yes. Right. And, you know, so and then the other thing is that apparently, because there was an interview with Jessica Gao, who's the head writer for She-Hulk, and she wrote the Pickle Rick episode of Rick and Morty. I don't know if you are familiar with that. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Which, like, yeah. So if you've seen Rick and Morty and you have not seen She-Hulk, you probably should, because it's like a lot of the sense of humor is similar. But apparently in an interview, she said that she was really like struggling with how to end the show. And she was like, you know, I feel like this type of sort of action heavy slugfest is sort of what's expected of me, but I'm doesn't feel right for the character. And then she went and talked to Kevin Feige, and he was like, you don't have, why do you think you have to do that? Like, and so, you know, how much of that is like the marketing machine for Marvel being like, see, we're not just like this. We're not, you know, we're the ones coming up with the AI Kevin joke. We're not actually, you know, we aren't actually the algorithm formulaic cookie cutter producer. Right. So that might be them trying to play interference a little bit. Who knows? But, you know, the idea that like, that she got permission and got encouraged to create the ending that made more sense for the character, made more sense for the show, and sort of like poked fun at Marvel, I think was really great.
Wow.
Sure.
Wow. Oh, wow. Well, man, I feel like we can keep going, but we unfortunately
I could sit here and talk about the
I know
answers from behind the scenes of like the Winter Soldier and you know Falcon.
I would like to just like one last question. Like, is there anything that you're excited about that's coming up, or things that you've just started kind of like digging into that you're just like, this is going to be, you know, something that, you know, something exciting, you know, as I'm going back to, which I don't know how you write all of this. I am like blown away by the fact that even happens. But
I've learned to write on my phone is the answer.
Wow.
And I sleep less than I used to. The other half of it.
Wow.
Otherwise, like I don't. It's hard. It's hard to make the time.
Yeah.
But the nice thing actually for me as a writer is that built into this, like, you know, an episode drops, you wait a week. There's actually like a deadline built in. It's trickier with like, so for instance, I never wrote about Stranger Things because it dropped all at once, and I was like, this is too much.
Yeah.
Okay. Where the like one episode a week gives me this like flow of like, okay, like I have until, you know, I want to get it out as soon as I can, but I have until the next week's episode to get this out. And so that helps a lot too. And people seem to really like that. The collective experience of, you know, watching a show, consuming all the criticism, seeing other people's reactions to it, and then anticipating and speculating what's going to happen next week. What does this mean? Like, I think that's as much a part of the entertainment as the show itself.
I was going to ask you that, like, what do you like, the episode drops or just like the once a week thing? And like, there is like, I'm a team of both, like where, like I was watching Wrexham FC with Ryan Reynolds and Rob McAlily. Is that
where he has his own football team?
Yeah. So it's a soccer team in Wales, a football team. Yeah. And they were dropping it once a week. And I was like, I just want to see it all, because we're in last season and the team is already playing this season. So if you follow the team now, you know what happened because of whatever. But the documentary series is amazing. But that I would wanted a whole episode, like all the episodes dumped. But I liked the She-Hulk like once a week. I like it because I go back with Dan, like it brings me back to being nostalgic where everyone isn't at episode 4 or like, oh, I watched it all. I binge watched Stranger Things. It's like everyone gets to talk about it for like a week. It's like, oh, did you see it? Yeah, I saw it. Oh, this is great. And then this. And it's like, oh, I can't wait for next week. So like, at least then you have like a couple of days to have a conversation with people instead of going, well, I can't talk to you. I already saw the whole season, and that kind of sucks.
Right. Or you have to do the thing where you try to feel out how far along the other person is.
Yeah.
Like, so what just happened in the last episode? Oh, don't tell me. No. Like you have to, it's so awkward sometimes.
I was like that with Stranger Things because I was on vacation when it came out and I watched like 4 of the episodes and my niece had like watched it all. And she started talking. And I was like, stop, just stop, just stop, just stop. And like, you can't even like look at stuff online because people are doing memes and you're like, what episode is that from? And that's where it gets annoying, that's where I do like the once a week thing. Cause then at least you're not like seeing the final episode posted on Instagram because somebody had to be the one that spoils it. At least then it gives you like, listen, man, the thing got released 2 weeks ago. If you haven't seen it, that's your fault. You shouldn't be listening to this podcast, like kind of thing. But like, so it is tough when you do
one of my favorite pop culture podcasts, other than this one, to listen to, is the Ringerverse. They do their spoiler warning is hilarious because they're like, I guess we have to do a spoiler warning for an instant reaction to something, something we've seen because you came here for our reaction and we have to warn you. And then, he's like, this is a reaction podcast.
Yeah.
like he shouldn't, like very bitter, like he shouldn't have to.
Like he shouldn't have to tell you. Like,
oh my
it's
God.
like going
that's
to
why
a
you're listening.
comedy show and like people get offended. It's like, we're at a comedy show. Like I've been there where the guy's like, this is a comedy show, right? Yeah. Like where do you think
I've actually had to kind of figure out how I want to handle spoilers in my reviews because like I was saying earlier, like to do the thumbs up, thumbs down, should you check the recommendation function of like, should you check this out, has to be spoiler free. But at the same time, to really do the deep dive analysis, it's so hard to do it without mentioning spoilers. And so I've kind of had to, originally I sort of started out by saying, okay, well, I'll do a spoiler free as long as I can. Yeah. And that just kept getting harder and harder to do. So now I just sort of like, usually if it's the first episode of a show and people haven't checked it out yet, then maybe I'll do that spoiler free. But then after that, I'm like, no, I have to just get it. Because the writing professor in me and the kind of English literature nerd in me is like, I need to do a close reading. I have to be able to cite specific examples. And if inevitably that is going to, produce spoilers and I don't know how to fix that.
Oh, wow. So I mean, are there things that you're excited about that are coming out? Yeah.
I was trying to remember. I'm like, he asked me another question.
No, that's okay.
So I'm always trying to evangelize Star Wars animated shows, but I think what's going to get lost in the shuffle because of Andor is that on Wednesday, I think they're airing on the same day, is a new animated series called Tales of the Jedi, and they're animated shorts. And it's sort of like an anthology. And what they're doing is they're going back to the prequel era and following Count Dooku and Ahsoka Tano, and from like as their kind of origin stories. And from, when I first heard about this, I'm like, that sounds cool. And like, I'll watch anything Dave Filoni creates because he's Star Wars hero. He's like the lore master. He's keeping it all together. He's one of the two people behind The Mandalorian, and all the animated shows. And so I was like, I'm in no matter what, but I was kind of like, I don't know what this is, but I saw the trailer and it brought, again, to go back to nostalgia, it brought me back to what it was like watching the original Clone Wars animated series, and how rich and kind of like, and it brought back a feeling. And so I think it's going to be, really big, especially with people who watch the Clone Wars. But it's also release dates for all these shows is very confusing because they all kind of started coming out at the same time. And I think House of the Dragon won because it was first. And then people started watching that. And then they're like, oh, and I'm guilty of this too. Like, I haven't watched Rings of Power yet because I'm just like, I don't have time. I'm already committed to these other shows. So I think that Tales of the Jedi is kind of like a thing that's not going to be on people's radar probably. So if you're a Star Wars fan and you haven't, you don't know about that, that's a good thing to check out. Obviously, Wakanda Forever is probably my most anticipated movie of this year. Would be my guess.
Can't wait.
It looks so good. And I went from being like, this movie can't be good, just based on the tragic circumstances surrounding it, and kind of like there were production issues, like there were delays. There were all these news articles coming out of like, uh-oh. And then once that trailer came out at Comic-Con, I was like, oh no, we're good. This is going to be amazing. And so I hope that ends up being true. I'm just that's probably my most hyped movie that's coming out soon. And then I'm trying to think of other shows. What's weird is that like after Andor ends, there's going to be kind of like a little bit of a lull. Like, so Marvel is the next thing Marvel's doing is holiday special, Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special.
Oh God, they didn't learn their lesson from the Star Wars holiday special.
I don't know. Who knows? Hope maybe it'll make jokes about that. Like, we'll see. She-Hulk may set a precedent now that anything could be meta. So yeah, there's going to be a Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special, which I don't really know much about that or what to expect from that. It might just be a lot of Groot like dressed with like a Christmas tree or something. And then I think it isn't until the spring that the next series, Secret Invasion, starts, which looks really good. The cast for that, they got like Olivia Colman, Oscar winner Olivia Colman is in that show. Like, how did they do that? So yeah, that I'm also looking forward to. But there's with this winter is going to, as far as I can tell, it's going to be kind of like a little bit of a lull.
Okay. Wow.
Last thing before we go, I know we got to go, Dan. You had brought up Lightyear. I want to know just your feeling on it.
So I haven't finished it.
You haven't?
So I don't know how well I can answer this question. Well, what happened was...
Why haven't you finished it?
Because I tried watching it with my kids.
Okay.
And they kind of were like, this is too scary. And or they had too many questions. And I was just like, this is not worth it. You know what I mean? They were like, well, what's, because they love Woody, they love Buzz, they're into the Toy Story movies, and so I was like, oh great. And so then I started watching this, and I think it was too mature. My kids are 3 and almost 6, so it was like it just wasn't the right. And then we tried to watch it, failed. So I've seen the beginning, and it seemed fine, but also I was kind of like, what are we doing? I
was confused. I have not seen it because I had no idea what to do with it.
I saw it at the theater because obviously I was like, I can't wait. This is going to be the movie that Andy watched and like made him fall in love with this character. And I was like, I came out of it as I'm not going to spoil what happens. I thought it was a little bit of like, how is this the movie that the child got so obsessed with this character? Like it was supposed to be like Luke Skywalker. Like we were watching Luke Skywalker and we got the Luke Skywalker toy. Andy was watching Lightyear and was like, I can't wait for Lightyear. All the kids were watching it. And I was just like, it was good, but it was just like
what I had watched seemed very sad. Which is now Pixar's trademark. Like a Pixar movie can make me cry in under 30 seconds.
Oh dear God!
Like,
it is sad. I mean, they know how to do that, right? They know they love waterfalls. It's like, but I thought they could have done. I guess I wanted more, and I didn't want the toy Buzz, but I wanted the obsession of Andy because, like, to me, I was Andy.
Did you want it to be kind of more like lighthearted adventure?
Yes. I wanted to be a kid. Like Andy was what, 8, 9, right? That wasn't an 8 and 9-year-old movie. That was maybe like a teenager's movie. And I'm like, this wouldn't have played.
Yeah, part of me was like, maybe I should just go watch The Martian instead.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So like I was the way I was reading it, and I guess I got too meta about it, was like, and I was like arguing with my own. I mean,
they were asking, like, they're inviting that. They're inviting that because they're like, this is the, go back to Chris Evans's original tweet where he's like, this is I can't even quote it properly because it was so weird. Like he's like, this is the movie upon which Buzz Lightyear the toy is based, but it's the real person. Like he had some convoluted explanation and clarifying what the movie was.
Oh, boy.
Sure. Yeah, Dan and I said it. I was like, we're watching the movie that Andy watched. Like, so he went to the movie to watch this character play, this real life character play, and we're watching it, and then they made a toy on it. So it's not, and everybody was like, oh, but I wanted more of like the toy, but the toy was its own character.
It's a toy.
It's just a toy. And I'm like going back and forth. But like what you said,
crazy.
like, but I wanted to see like I wanted to see a lighthearted, like I could have seen like a Finding Nemo type of thing. Like it wasn't that lighthearted. It was, and there was like, I can't say more, but I'm just like,
Yeah.
There was just stuff in it that I was like, this is a lot for a child.
I mean, Pixar has become known for the existentialism in their stories.
There's
right?
a lot of messages.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wally, Wally's like, whoa, like we're not that far.
We're living that.
Wally.
We're living
Like,
it.
Yeah.
We're living it.
Yeah, like they don't even
We're
touch
living
each
it.
other. Like, oh god, it was crazy. Yeah, no, it's definitely
But yeah, I think that's a really interesting case where the franchise has grown up and it hasn't worked out really, right? Because Pixar is sort of on a down. I still will watch and enjoy Pixar movies, but I'd say in terms of pop culture zeitgeist, Pixar is a little bit on of a downswing.
Yes.
Right. And I think that's because the movies have matured too much with the audience.
Yes.
Wow.
Because I think if you like Toy Story 4 is about Woody having a midlife crisis.
Dude, but Toy Story 4 was one of my favorites. Like,
it's really, I love Kaboom all day. Like but if you think about the content of it and the story and the themes and stuff are are more targeted at the adult who grew up watching Woody more than a new generation of kids kind of getting into Woody.
Absolutely. That movie was for us to say goodbye.
Yeah.
That's what it was. Or like like my niece watched it and she felt the same way. She's 18 and she was like, oh my God, this is like what I'm going through right now. Like going to college and like leaving my teenage years, like saying goodbye to them and like growing up. So it was very much for that. And it was kind of like the second goodbye. Cause like we said goodbye to Andy in the second one. And now we were saying goodbye, like Buzz and his best friend were saying goodbye to each other. And it was like, all right, we're done. And I was like, all right, if they had ended it there, I would have been like, all right, I mean, that's what needs to be done. It's over. And I was expecting so much more from Lightyear. I wanted more. And I didn't get. I would have loved to just like, I know I'm a 41-year-old, but I wanted a child's. Like I wanted my niece and nephew.
I think you wanted a Saturday morning cartoon series with Buzz Lightyear.
Annie is having a moment. I'm like sitting there watching you, like just try to
because I was so upset. I was so upset. I wanted my nieces and nephew to be like, "Oh my God, Lightyear!"
Well,
like, and it's not going to happen.
Like at some point,
nah, it's not going to
get it. Look, Manny. I think it's all going to be fine.
It's not going to happen.
Just have them watch the earlier movies. It's fine.
And you can't do Woody because like Woody's like character was like way older, you know, like based on like his Andy's great like grandfather gave him that toy.
Jesus Christ. We need to have you back on, Jen, immediately because because
we could talk. We talked about everything. We could talk.
I want to talk about Toy Story because that's a great franchise.
Because this has been such an amazing conversation. I cannot wait to I hope everyone is just getting so much out of it because this is why I love this podcast because it's like these types of exchanges because this is what as a kid I wanted to happen. I wanted to be able to be okay to be this excited about these things that like I looked at in my attic and like kind of was just up there like watching something so no one like was like you're still looking at Punisher comics or like you care about like these movies so much you care about the original Star Wars more than this one because the explosions look different, they added this stuff in. Like I was that person, but like I'm so glad that we have these spaces now. But thank you so much for coming on. I am like so grateful. I'm glad we made it happen. Tell everyone where they could find your website or again, also if they any social media or anything so that they can read your amazing site.
Sure, I appreciate it. So it's thelongtake.substack.com. And if you're not familiar with Substack, it's sort of a hybrid blog and a newsletter platform. So you can go to that site, thelongtake.substack.com, and all of my reviews are up there to sort of browse. But if you subscribe and it's free, then you can get the new reviews that I'm putting out right to your inbox. So people usually like this because if I'm covering a show that's weekly, right, it'll come, whenever I get to it, a couple of days after I've seen it, after it's dropped, then you can sort of get my breakdown of it and relive it all over again. So that's where my site is, where you can find my writing. I'm also on social media at Sopchockchai, Sopchockchai. And that's on Twitter and Instagram. And usually I'm posting, if I'm not posting my reviews there, because I do that, I'm also posting Star Wars toys. Usually
Admiral Akbar, mostly.
That's true. I do, in the month of August, I do Akbar August, where every day I post something about Admiral Akbar, because he's my favorite minor Star Wars character. And I have an absurd amount of Admiral Akbar figures and merchandise.
It's amazing.
And yeah, so it's usually Star Wars stuff that I'm collecting, or things I'm watching, or my cats. Usually they pop up sometimes too.
Wow. Well,
awesome.
Everybody get on that, follow, sign up for the newsletter right away. Just do that right away, because it's an amazing resource. And just also the writing is just so rich. And
I would like to see a deep dive on how Sid was actually a very great character. And
don't start this conversation. The podcast.
We will get to the bottom of this. We will figure out what happened with Lightyear.
His imagination was great.
We'll do it.
I will go back and rewatch. I will finish watching Lightyear just for you, man.
We'll do a Rocky franchise like Toy Story breakdown.
Yes. Oh,
so
dude, Sid.
But everybody, follow the Nostalgia Test on Instagram and TikTok at the Nostalgia Test, Twitter at Nostalgia Test. Get in touch with us, get in the conversation, get in the mix, and just follow, like, subscribe. Everybody, thank you so much. Jen, once again, thank you so much. And everybody, we'll see you on the next episode.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. Please.
Can I do
Jen,
one thing before?
Sid, come on. You know what I'm talking about, right?
We do one thing.
Did you know? Sorry, wait. Did you know? Sorry, Dan. We're really sorry. Okay. Did you know that at Halloween time in Disneyland, they have Sid as a character walking around?
Yeah, I think I've seen that. Yeah,
what's
he's
crazy
terrifying.
Is, you know that they say like he grows up to be the garbage man who like takes care of the toys, the leftover, the forgotten toys, and he's the guy that's driving the truck. That there's a fan theory that it's him, because he like realized, like, after he got scared by all the toys, like his job was like now to like keep like Misfits toys like alive. But then there's another theory that like that he was actually the most creative, where like he would like shutting his creativity down messed him up, because like he was like taking different toys and putting them together and creating his own imagination. Like his imagination was creating his own toys, so it was not torture, it was more like he was creating new characters. And by like stopping that is like it was stunning his growth of like a human and an artist. And like then he like
I feel like I've seen lots of tweets about that, where they're like why are we squashing Sid's creativity?
Oh my god,
we say that now, like they weren't good parents back then. Like, like now
wait, like, all right, save it for the pod.
We have to do this. Okay.
I will do a marathon of Toy Story. That's like my favorite.
You say that now. You said you wanted to do a marathon of Rocky. I have the episode exactly where you said it, and you're like, we're doing this. And then 3 episodes in, you're like, I fucking hate this. I don't want to.
I will not hate Toy Story
anymore.
I will not hate Toy Story. I can't wait to cry.
I just want to take a picture so I can put that out as have a picture. So all right, you ready, Manning?
Yeah.
All right, here we go. Ready? All right. 1, 2, where am I? Okay, 3.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. Please subscribe to the Nostalgia Test podcast to know when new episodes drop. Don't forget to leave us 5 stars and a positive review so more people can find the podcast. Share your thoughts and memories on today's topic on our Twitter at Nostalgia Test and on Instagram at The Nostalgia Test. Tune in next time, because you never know what pop culture will pop up on The Nostalgia Test.